Welcome to the Dish Pig, where we go on a journey of discovery in the food and beverage world. I'm your host, Nick Sherry. Well, it's Thanksgiving next week. A day to be thankful. A day which I believe is the anniversary of when turkeys were first discovered by the Pilgrims swimming off the coast of Cape Cod in 1621. Is that true? I'll let you be the judge. But it's a day where we get together with friends and family and drink and we eat and we argue about the state of the world. I can't wait. This week, from the mean streets of Falkenberg, Sweden, to Guadalajara, Mexico, via Melbourne, Australia, we're chatting with the delightful Freddy Andreasson, coffee and Mezcal connoisseur and owner of Algaia Altanero. Please note that there is some colourful language in this interview. So give thanks, and let's jump into it. I can hear the pouring of a Mezcal.
How good does that sound, though?
I think before even getting into even asking you a question, I think we need to break down where we are actually not sitting, we're standing.
Standing.
But if you want to describe where we're standing right now, I think it'd be amazing.
Geographically? Geographically, we are in the state of Jalisco in Mexico, in Guadalajara. We are 2 floors down in the basement of Algaia Altanero. We're in a room that was hidden for like 90 years full of dirt.
Wow.
Which is now my private mezcal bar.
Little basement mezcal bar.
Yeah.
What was so what was the space used for, like way back when? I mean, how old's the building? Roughly.
So the building where we're in right now is actually a part of the building on the corner, which was probably a bit over 100 years old, and this is where the stables were. And I've spoken to a few different people, and there's different theories. Some people think they were hiding Christians down here. Then there was like the Christian wars, Catholics versus Christians. That was a thing that happened here.
Yeah.
And some people said they hid their daughters down here.
God.
Yeah, I know. Foul story. But in the end, I asked an architect, and he's like, no, that's just their storage. So there's been heaps of stories. People I bring down, before we built the bar, I brought people down, I would ask them, what do you think it was? But, after bringing an architect, he was like, no, this is really common in old house. It's just like they could have stored, it could have been a garden shed for all we know. But it's like, there's definitely a storage, just nothing weird, Well,
it's great that you bring it back to life.
Yeah. Well, I mean, upstairs where the cafe is, we used to be a dildo shop.
Okay.
You didn't know, you wasn't aware of this?
No, I think I was aware of this. Yeah.
So
but I would say that the dildo shop doesn't have as rich a history going back, 100 plus years. This is something a bit more modern.
Yeah. But there's if you look at the story of this house, looking back, being a stables, and then obviously find this room. We did find a bone down here and a lady's shoes, and there was some weird little we thought was bullet holes in the wall, and but then looking at then at the fact that upstairs used to be a dildo shop and where Algaia is, which is kind of like a balcony, really. Yeah. They used to have orgies up there, it was like one day of the month where they would meet up.
Interesting.
Yeah, so, you pull all these things together, you can't help just to, the place is going to be a bit weird,
It could also, one thing that we haven't mentioned is that there's one working light bulb in the corner, and we're standing here. The rest of the light is all by candlelight. It's very romantic.
It is very romantic.
It could also be the setting for, maybe a horror film. Like things could go wrong, horribly wrong here.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, we are locked in a very small space where there's only high-proof alcohol. Yeah. There was probably 25 bottles of 5-liter bottles full with high-proof alcohol. It's going to get weird.
It's dangerous. It's dangerous. Well, Freddie, thanks for having me in the state of Jalisco.
Oh, yeah. Well.
What was the last thing that you cooked for yourself?
Last thing I cooked myself was pasta. I enjoy cooking pasta, but I make myself sauce from scratch.
Yeah.
Just simple, pomodoro sauce, some mushrooms, a bit of Parmesan cheese.
So vegetarian?
I rarely cook meat at home.
Okay.
Because I eat out most of the time. So like cooking for me is obviously working in the restaurant industry too. Like you're always in this environment, and it's not necessarily relaxing. Mm-hmm. So cooking for me was always eating out, always being with people, always talking to people. Cooking for me was like a way of unwinding. So I'd come home, lay out your veg or whatever you're doing, the chopping and starting it and building it from scratch and then eating was like, it's probably an hour and 20 minutes of a process. And whilst I'm done doing that, I feel at home.
It's the kind of, I've said this many times, and I was speaking to someone the other day as well. It's one, well, at least for me, it's one way to really kind of tune out from the world, tune out from your day, just focus on one particular thing. Yeah,
which we rarely do anymore.
Yeah.
Like we're pulled in so many different directions all the time, especially with obviously phones, blah, 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 having WhatsApp, always being really available. We never really disconnect, So yeah, it's really like the only thing I do that's really disconnecting. That and, getting really stoned and watching Seinfeld. I still do that, even like it's been...
Who doesn't?
15 years, and I'm still like, now and then I'm like, oh yes.
Well, it's just been, they've redone in 4K. It's going to be on Netflix soon.
It's got released today.
Oh, it's today, was it?
Yeah, I've been doing the countdown.
Oh wow. Well, maybe we won't go out tonight. Maybe we'll just sit on the couch and watch some 4K Seinfeld.
4K Seinfeld.
But tell me your journey. I mean, you are a tall Swedish man.
Yes.
Who owns a bar and cafe in Guadalajara, Jalisco, Mexico.
Yes.
Let's take it back to the homeland, because, I mean, it's going to be a journey to how you actually ended up here.
Yes.
But tell me about home. So, look, where were you born in Sweden?
I'm born in a small town on the west coast. It's about 20,000 people. It's a little tourist town. I mean, the summer doubles in population. Rest of the year, it kind of sucks. There's not much to do. A lot of fishing. But yeah, really, it's like it has two factories. One's the brewery. Was a dairy factory there. Diaper factory.
Diaper factory.
Diaper factory. Yeah.
So well stocked on beer, milk, cream.
Yeah.
And diapers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So the breweries, especially the brewery, because it's been there for about 130 years, I think, something like that, 140 years.
What's the beer called, the brewery?
It's called Falcon.
Falcon, okay.
Yeah. So most of my family's worked with generations. Like my grandmother worked, and my great grandfather
at the brewery.
At the brewery, yeah.
Oh wow. Okay.
So they all, and it's always sounds romantic too when you say like, oh, my generations worked in the brewery or whatever, and I was like, oh, they're a generation of brewers, and I was like, no, they're a generation of factory workers. Okay. Like they were drunk factory workers. You can't really, like they're working class people, and that's sort of where I grew up, and I myself worked at the same brewery.
Oh, you did?
Yes. So I grew up in this small town, and then, really being, it's like, didn't really go to school very much.
Yeah.
Didn't really like school at all.
Did you finish school?
No, I dropped out of high school.
Okay.
Started working at the factory, and then really worked there for 4 months. Couldn't get my job back because I told my boss to go fuck himself. Well, he's just a bit, he was trying to put me in place, and I didn't really like it,
And what, were you like 16, 17? Like how old were you at the time?
I would have just turned 18.
Oh, okay, so you dropped out of high school like right towards the end.
Yeah. So
okay.
Sweden works a bit differently, but I did it's like a secondary when you kind of go when you're 17, you go into the last 3 years of school. We do an extra year than in Australia, for example.
Okay.
So I tried. I had no grades. I did my grades in 8 months, and I got into which is social studies, and I did 6 months, and I was And I wasn't really studying either. I was selling Levi's jeans out of my locker and phones, and I was always more of a hustler than a student, really.
So, I mean, at the time, being in, such a small town, there's some, a few key local industries that I guess a lot of local residents would probably move into.
Yeah.
What's going through your mind at the time is well, what the hell am I going to do after, I get out of school?
There was really no plan. The way I saw it growing up was having having ambition to do something, but absolutely seeing no type of success around you, or not seeing anything that you feel would fit you. So growing up in a working class environment and not really being like, oh, I don't want any of this. So that, for me, it meant that I became really reckless because I was like, well, worst case scenario, like I'll go to jail and I'll go back and work at the factory. So like, for me, I was like, I didn't see a difference. I was like, oh, in the end, I'm just going to work at the factory. So I never really saw myself like have a career or anything.
Right. Do you think that meant that you could probably, I don't know, take a few more risks if you kind of knew it's like, look, worst case scenario,
oh, yeah,
I'm going to, they'll throw me in jail and I'll get out and then I'll go work in the factory.
Yeah. So like, it was risks. I was talking like not just breaking the law, but like in general of just being like, just go balls deep in everything. I mean, like that's why I'm in Mexico right now because I've just still, up until like I'd say 2-3 years ago, I was still kind of, still like taking a risk. Like moving to Mexico was a risk too. But then like when you then build something like a business and have employees and have responsibility, you start having, you're responsible, you've built something. And then, that kind of clicked over to self-responsibility rather than just being like, I'll do whatever I want, whenever I want.
Yeah. So you're at the brewery for 4 months.
Yes.
You tell your boss to
Go fuck himself.
Go fuck himself.
Yeah.
What happens next?
So after that, I started growing marijuana, and I started selling marijuana. So I was a full-time drug dealer for a while, and I got good at it.
Okay.
And people started noticing that, I guess, and
the police or just like customers?
No, just the general gang scene. So I got in a few situations where I felt that like I don't really want to be in a place where there's guns and gangsters. Like I was like, I'm a weed dealer. Like I was good at what I did, and I do like marijuana. So I felt like I could stand behind it.
Sweden doesn't really. I mean, but when people think of Sweden, gang violence doesn't really come to mind straight away.
No, not at all. I mean,
I'm trying to imagine what like a Swedish gangster is like.
It's my hometown had like I think 2 generations of like a few really criminal people.
Okay.
And it was kind of like a tradition that started with a few people.
Yeah.
And it's kind of continued, and I think now it's a little bit different. But yeah, there definitely is. I mean, like my local bar got shot up in an Uzi.
Really?
Yeah.
Jesus.
So it looks really idyllic, but there is definitely like everywhere else. There's
Interesting.
Yeah, there's definitely some violence, but
what was the did anyone find out why? Just revenge for something?
They didn't get let into the nightclub.
So they took an Uzi to the bar?
Yeah, after it was closed. They didn't do it like when there was people in there.
Got it.
It was a symbolic...
A symbolic drive-by.
Yeah, pussies.
Wow.
But yeah, so... I got in a situation where I was like, oh, mate, what are you doing? Like, I still remember having this meeting in this apartment. It was like... Apparently I'd sold marijuana to someone I shouldn't have sold to because it's their market or whatever, and I had to have this full-on like sit down, and there was this guy there with a gun, and I was like, I remember in the moment I was shit scared, and I thought to myself like, you need to get the fuck out of here.
Wow.
And when you've done it for so long too, it's not like you just like, I'm just going to go from doing full-time drug dealing to like start work at a factory.
Yeah.
So the way I saw it, I just got to get out, So
how long? I mean, how long was this period of your life going on for?
I'd say about 1.5 years.
Okay.
Yeah. Definitely like 1.5 years, it's not that much of a time, but it's definitely a really impactful time on my life. It definitely, like doing that and then that happening to me kind of changed the course of my life forever, because then I decided I need to get out, and then I bought a trip to Australia. What a one-way ticket. How did
you land on Australia? And was it to Melbourne?
To Melbourne, yeah. I had 2 clients that were at my house buying weed.
Clients, very official. I love it.
Yeah.
Couple of clients.
And they were asking me, they said, hey, how are you, they're like, oh, what are you doing for the winter? Because it's really common in Sweden that, people work all year long and save up money and travel for the winter because it's really cold.
Yeah.
So like, what are you doing for winter? And I said, I think I'm doing South America. That was kind of my plan, but I would like that also like being, in that industry that I was in, and then just like making a bunch of money and then just going to South America is not really a sustainable plan. It's, it's after 3-4 months, you have to go home.
Yeah.
So anyhow, these guys said, we're going to Australia. My sister is living there with her boyfriend, and they live in this big share house and blah, blah, and you can get a working visa and you can stay there for a year. And I said, I was interested in living somewhere else.
Yeah.
More than traveling, really.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so I booked a ticket the day after, and I with like Air China,
Okay.
and it was the cheapest ticket I've ever bought. It was, I can't remember, it was like $600, I think, or something.
And did it take you like 3 days to get to Australia?
Yeah, it was like 48 hours more than that or something. So it's like going to London, then from London landing twice in China, and then going to Australia.
That's a beast of a journey.
Yeah, actually, accidentally too. That was the first time accidentally smuggling drugs across like very many national borders. About a week after arriving in Australia, I was sitting at this kitchen table. I put these jeans shorts on, put my hand in the pocket, and just ripped out like a 5 gram ball of hash. And I was like, "Fuck!" Landed twice in China. Can you imagine Chinese prison?
Yeah, you should be dead twice.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I never knew that. I'm thinking back to this brewery that was in your hometown, because I never knew that part of your story. And did that kind of, I think, implant something in your mind that, okay, if there's something I'm going to move on to, it's going to be something in hospitality, or the booze industry. Like, is it?
No. There was something like sort of, the connection that was sort of made later on. And, looking back at like, how I was growing up and what I like to do, kind of, ties into being successful in hospitality. Like, just thing like obviously I've worked in the coffee, I've worked in agave, I've worked in some fine dining, and obviously it's all about the flavor.
Mm-hmm.
Like as a kid, for example, I remember my parents changed the brand of milk that we used to drink, and I was like furious, and I was like, buy the other brand, like I don't like this milk. And she's like, what are you talking about? Milk's milk, you can't taste the difference. And
that's complete. Yeah, I mean, I'm completely on your side here. I can imagine just taking a sip and then just like spitting it out across the kitchen. It's like, what is this shit?
Yeah. I was born to be a snob, like. So Nick calls me Chief Wankster, But yeah, so I challenged my parents, and they bought 4 types of milk, and I did a blind tasting. I picked every single brand.
Wow.
Yeah. So that, though, looking back at it now, I was like, I was tasting coffee and tasting stuff and being like, oh, actually, I give a palate,
Tell you what, nice parents. I mean, if that was any other parent, you'd think you'd say, just shut up, you're drinking this milk. Like, I'm buying it, you're drinking it.
I'm pretty convincing.
Okay.
I had but with my business partner, Nick Reed, we had a feedback session, and he said, like, you argue a lot, and I think sometimes you like arguing rather than getting to the point. And I was like, yes, like that is completely true. I just love a good argument,
Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. So you arrive in Melbourne.
Yeah.
Did you? Was there a plan? Was there an idea of what you were? I mean, you'd saved up a bit of money, of course.
Yeah.
What were you thinking?
Yeah, nothing. Like, it was just getting out and kind of changing my life around, and moving across the world like that in a new place, and it's a share house with like 12 people.
Oh wow. Yeah. One of those like okay.
Yeah, like Carlton. On the corner of Queensbury and Lygon. It's like, really
one of those like terrace houses.
Yeah. Old Victorian, beautiful place, full of rats, obviously. But, arriving there and seeing all these different nationalities living in the same house, there's Kiwis, there's Australians living there, there's Italians, French, and everyone just pretty much every afternoon have, drinking long necks and, smoking bongs and like, skating. It was, everyone just going to work and just existing. And I think, I just really wanted to do that, like, but being a big city and just exist with other people in your same age, and because I was a small town, evolved in crime. It wasn't like, it's a very small world, like, because when you do that, you're kind of excluded from everything else. Like, you don't have workmates, you have clients and gangster people. Like, it's a small world. I arrived with all this money, and all I did was skate, smoke weed, drink beer. Exploring Melbourne, really tried acid for the first time.
Okay.
Blew my mind. And then I ran out of money after about 3.5 months. And I remember I had like $27, and I bought it's a really cheap bourbon. I can't remember what it was called, but I bought a bottle of cheap bourbon. I drank it that night, and I got to know a guy that night that worked as a chef, and I said, "Oh, can you get me a job at the cafe you work at?" And he said, "I'll get you an interview, but I can't get you a job." I said, "Okay, fine, that's." So I went to it on Monday, and I lied to the guy. I was like, "Have you ever worked in hospitality?" I was like, "Yeah, I worked in 3 cafes. I know how to make coffee." I just lied, and then got a week trial. worked the hardest I could, convinced the guy was good. And after a week, he sat me down and was like, "You've never done this before, have you?" And I was like, "No, I have no idea." And I was like, "I'm really sorry I lied to you, but I really need a job." And he goes, "I appreciate your honesty, and like, you did, work quite well." So, and I stayed there for like a year and a half.
What was the name of the cafe?
It was a cafe at the University of Melbourne called Barretto.
Okay.
Nothing really like good. It was, serving the people who worked at the University of Melbourne and the students there. So it's like, but what I learned was high volume. So like we'd pump out, fucking 8-10 kilos of coffee a day. It was really like big volume. I learned to be quick.
Yeah.
Really, In the beginning, I hated it too. Like people being rude to me. I didn't understand Australian accent.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I had to repeat to people all the time, and they'd be like, they go back, be annoyed at me, and I would just ignore that client and go to the next one. And my manager would be like, "Hey, Freddie, can I talk to you?" I was like, "Yeah." And it's like, when someone's rude to you, you can't just ignore them. And, because you got to remember too, I came from like a year and a half of drug dealing. So I was like, I don't take that shit.
So so you walked off, got your Uzi, came back.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And then, obviously I did have moments there like doing dishes because like I got put on dishes a lot.
I love it.
Yeah. So I remember like doing dishes, like washing these dirty dishes and just thinking like, man, like just like 3 months ago, you were just, just doing deals that would make you more money you make in a month here, like in an afternoon, and just do nothing. So it was really like, for me, it was.
So you were kind of missing it.
I wasn't missing it. I just think it was a brutal truth.
Right.
Like now you actually have to get to work. So like it made me more humble. Kind of smacked me down to earth and go like, now get to work.
Yeah. This is, I guess, the entry point into the.
Yeah. So this is
into this new business for you.
Yeah. So I got into hospitality. At this point, I was 21 years old. So okay. Yeah. So this is the thing. It's like I've grown up, like I kicked out of school several times. I've become a criminal. I've been to Asia, traveled Asia twice, and pretty much run away from my own country because I was like, it's getting dangerous. And I'm 21 years old, arrived to Melbourne. It's like already at this point, I was always like, oh, fuck, I'm a bit tired. Like there was a lot of.
I just want to find a nice girl, get a place, settle down.
Yeah. So
maybe get a farm.
Yeah. But that's really what I did too. I mean, I met a girl there like after 4 months, and we were together for 7 years. And I was in Australia for 7 years. So I think that's it. Like I was saying too, like I just wanted to like have a job and just hang out with people and just exist in a big city. That's all I was interested in. I wasn't looking. There was no career plan. It was just experiencing life a bit more, like real life, not the world I used to live in.
That's really interesting. But I mean. Yeah, that kind of, because like speaking to anyone about, like if they start a brand, if they start a restaurant, start a bar, like there's there's this ambition there that's like, I'm going to build this up to a certain point. And, I guess in a way you were kind of being pretty grateful for like this reset and this restart.
Oh, absolutely. I was the happiest I've ever been in my entire life. And also I had I felt like where I was growing up, I was dealt that situation. And obviously my own risk-taking behavior brought me to, a certain type of lifestyle. But like when I was in Melbourne, I thought, I can start from scratch now. No one knows who I am. No one knows what I've done. So that's what I did. I mean, like my background work, like in my criminal background, is like something I never talk about because I just thought, why? I can choose to erase that out of my life. And now, like, because it's like 15 years ago, or it's like 12 years ago, a little bit more, now it's just a fun fact,
Yeah.
But, when you were there and you're younger, I didn't want to be that person.
So, like, these days when you go home for a visit, like, you're not looking over your shoulder to see who's going to be coming to score some old debts and...
No. They're like, some of the guys have been to jail and some are dead.
Okay. Shouldn't laugh, but,
Yeah. I recently went back to Sweden to visit my family, and my mum reminded me. She said, "Do you remember when you just gone to Australia and the police trying to raid my house?" And I was like, "Oh yeah." So, about 3 months after arriving to Australia, my mum calls me and she goes, "There's 3 police officers in my house looking for you."
Holy shit!
Yeah. So, and I kind of forgot about it, and my mum reminded me, and yeah. So there was a guy that I used to do deals with that got arrested and hadn't changed his phone for 4 years.
Okay.
Which means there's like a long history of messages and phone calls, and obviously I was on there.
Yeah.
So she said, my mum, very brave and very smart, said, oh, my son doesn't live here and he'll never be coming back.
Wow.
So the police is like, oh. And, so my mom's like, yeah, but give me their number and I call them. I called them up and, and said, oh, why are you going to my mom's house? And is everything okay? I thought a friend had died. And they're like, oh, no, we would like to talk to you. When are you coming back? And I'm like, oh, never. So they just put the case down and that was it.
How did your folks kind of take that initially when you left?
My mum definitely was aware that I was kind of involved in something criminal. So she was like, I understand why you're leaving, And still to this day, she still tells me like, she's obviously, it's my mum, like she'll call me and cry and says I miss you, but she'll still understands very much why I'm here.
Yeah.
I would have never been, if I would have stayed in my hometown, I would never have been the person I am today.
It's interesting, man. At the same time, you were pretty much ahead of your time because these days, if you're selling marijuana, you're somewhat of a legitimate business person, depending where you are in the world, of course.
So crazy. Like us as of running with backpacks, like from the police of forests and stuff, and now you're just like, someone has to legal, like chains and like big politicians are investing in this business, and I'm like, motherfuckers, like.
So where did you after that stint at that first cafe?
Yeah.
What kind of led to the next place for you? So
they had a few places around that area, and I started working in one place that had a kitchen, a proper kitchen, and cooking. I always really liked cooking, and then obviously the chef working there. Whatever I did, I was still fairly ambitious. So like I was just behind the chef all the time. Like, what's that? How do you do that? How do you do that? Like just bombarding him with questions. I was fairly annoying, but always like wanting to know how things work and why, So it made me, learn things fairly quickly, but then get really bored of them really quickly. So it's like I had to constantly...
Like you want to move on to the next thing?
Well, whether it's work or in my personal life, throughout my life, they've fluctuated from being like private interests to work interests. But like this has to be something new all the time happening sort of thing. And then, obviously started applying that to work. I became more and more, a little bit more, professional and learning a bit more. But yeah, I moved on to, from there, where did I go? I went to start working at, there's a chain that have a roastery in Brunswick called Code Black.
Code Black?
Code Black.
Code Black?
Code Black, yeah. They have a roastery in Brunswick, and they have a few cafes around the city and stuff. Yeah. I started working there, and there I kind of started understanding my value a little bit as the customer contact. Like, I had so many regulars that would come and just have a chat, and I realized like, talking a lot, I never really thought was really a skill. Yeah. Because I didn't have any skills. Like, remember, I didn't go to school. I was literally considering myself useless. Just like, I just had, no fear and balls. Like, that's what, and when you're that young, you don't see, like now you look at someone like that and be like, oh, that person's going to be successful. But when you're that young, you don't see that, Yeah. But yeah, really what made me take coffee more seriously, because that's what I ended up working in. I remember the roaster came in one day and it was like, try this Kenyan coffee. It's a natural coffee and blah, blah. And, I tried it and I was like, why does it taste like blueberries? Like, what the fuck? Like, and he's like, oh, that's the way it comes from. And I was like, well, what do you mean? Why does it taste like fruit? Like, it just can't, And he goes, oh, that's the terroir. Like, that's the earth, the climate, that makes it. And I was like, that just blew my mind. So I was like, are you telling me that I'm tasting Kenyan earth? And he's like, well, pretty much. And that blew my mind. That something that is, made somewhere so far away, that's still one of the things that are still noble, because like you can produce a lot of things. Everything's now with, modernization of everything's produced quite, it's processed, Yeah. As of coffee to a certain degree, it's still from a farm, harvested by hand, and still very much taste of that place. Mm-hmm. And that's really what brought me into terroir, which kind of been a theme throughout my life after that, bringing me into agave, recently bringing me into wine,
And I guess it's always probably something that's very hard to talk about on podcasts sometimes, because people's taste buds, people's palate, like everyone's different. Yeah. I guess that's probably the most interesting thing about anything, your coffee or your liquor or your wine. Yeah. I've come across people in the past that have sees a glass of wine and they start looking at the color and they start smelling it and doing the full breakdown. Yeah. They're like, oh, it's bullshit. Like, it's red, it's heavy, that's it. Like,
Yeah.
or it's white. It's like a bit buttery. That's it. But it's really not. And
yeah, for me, it was always like, okay, why does it take? Because again, it's like that thing of like, why? How does that work? How do I do that? Like that constant thing of like, it's like the quest for knowledge. It's like once understanding that flavors exist because of a reason. So when you're tasting something and you say, yeah, it's all each person has different kinds of taste buds, and each person have different tastes. But once you understand why something you put context to the flavor.
Yeah,
and that's kind of like that's really what blows me away about it. Like, I like to know why it tastes like something. I go, why does it say smoky? What's the earth or this or the barrel or whatever it is,
What was next in terms of moving that interest in coffee forward? Because if that's kind of like the entry point was the cafe, but now we're kind of honing in more on like, all right, this is something that I'm really into. I'm starting to blend the personal interest with the work interest.
Yeah.
Because I think we were talking the other day about how you can, when you start talking about coffee, you can really geek out. You can start getting into water temperatures, grinds, different methods. But how did you kind of fuel that interest and kind of start building that knowledge?
I was always really interested. Well, I was interested in the backstory of the product. That was always my thing, really. I always want to do, I want things to be served well and done well. That's it. I don't care about, like, is the client going to know what you did? No. Like, it's sort of like a lot of baristas too. They just be wanking off each other all the time. Like, just like change it like 2 degrees and then like use a cold cup when you serve it in, and it will heighten the sweetness. And you go fuck yourself, mate. Like, no one's perceiving what you just did. Like, you're perceiving in your mind, and you might, trick someone into believing what you say, and it makes you feel important. You know what I mean? And I think I always had this underlying understanding that a barista is same as a bartender, and a good bartender would know this, is that it's 10% cocktail and 90% fucking hospitality. And I think learning that's kind of like, always maintaining that and realizing that was, made me become better in hospitality.
Do you think, because being in a city like Melbourne at the time, and I mean, I could be wrong about this, but you'll be able to tell me, does a city like Melbourne really have that good a reputation when it comes to coffee? It's something that I've always heard growing up. It's, the coffee in Melbourne's sensational. Yes, it's good, but at the same time, for the most part, especially growing up, all we're really talking about is that they make a really good latte.
Oh, yes.
Like, that was it. But I think it actually, for me personally, it took moving to America to actually start, I think, experiencing a hell of a lot more in terms of coffee, specifically like different beans, different this, different like having just a plain drip coffee, and actually just tasting that rather than kind of doing the espresso and mixing it with milk. But
no, you're definitely spot on. It was definitely like that. I mean, like, it is a big industry because it's worth a lot of money. That's why it's really big. It's because people buy like 3 coffees a day, and they spend $4 a pop.
Yeah.
So if you have fucking 250 people walking through your cafe every single day, which happens in the CBD. We go through 15 kilos of coffee in a rush in the morning, where it's like 3 hours of constant, like a line of people waiting to get coffee. It's business.
It's a good bit, yeah.
So that enables these people to spend money on really fancy machines and really fancy coffee machines and all this equipment. But like, the way I was trained in Melbourne was like, if people are not asking you about single origin bean or whatever, don't tell them. Like, that's how I was trained. Like,
don't push it on people.
Don't push it on people.
Okay.
And you're definitely right. I mean, it's a latte industry more than anything, but there's obviously a lot of passionate people behind that works in these roasteries and do work and run these cafes and open them. So they have an interest in it. So they do, buy really good coffee and, but it's probably, 10% of the market that actually cares?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's a high standard. Like, no one else has a standard of a latte. Like, the client in Melbourne is absolutely ridiculous. Like, I've worked in countries afterwards, especially here, like I've ran this cafe for 4 years in Mexico. Never have I ever had a client come up to me here and be like, listen, I'd like my foam a little bit less, a little bit hotter, and served in a cup half full. Like, Melburnians are ridiculous. Like, I've got some requests, and then they just know exactly what they want, and they'll be rude to you about it. You know? And also just drink the fucking coffee, mate. You know. So there's a few coffees like Patricia's, for example, which I really like. Coffee in Melbourne. What they did was just like milk coffee, black coffee, filter, and chocolate. Fuck off. That was it. I love that.
Did it say fuck off?
No, but it was a really polite way of saying fuck your cappuccino with extra chocolate, half foam with skinny milk.
Yeah.
You know? I think that was really refreshing. It was like a reaction to all this bullshit, you know.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, Patricia's.
And we can get as geeky as you want.
Yeah.
I've heard the phrase before, and I asked a good friend of mine, previous guest on the Dish Pig, Kale Zahili, cafe operator and owner in Melbourne, about the waves of coffee.
Yeah.
There's been there been 3 or 4 waves? You know what I'm talking about? How can you talk me through what the hell we're talking about when people refer to that came in the second wave of coffee?
Yeah. So I think
is it yeah, go. Tell me.
All right, see if I remember this right. So the third wave is specialty coffee.
Hang on, so we're starting the third wave.
Yeah, so the third wave is specialty coffee. And then the second wave, I believe, is the industrialization of coffee. And then the first wave is exporting coffee. So first wave is exporting coffee to the world. They're finding coffee and then exporting it to the world. And then I'm...
Kind of like Middle East, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Ethiopia is the origin of coffee.
Oh, that's where, that's...
Yeah, that's a whole story about this farmer, that noticed that his goats were eating coffee beans and they were couldn't sleep all night. And he was like, oh, that's pretty rad. He tried it himself and got all hyped up on caffeine, which now is interesting. The whole world's addicted to caffeine. I think it's funny no one actually talks about this, how addicted the world is to caffeine.
Yeah.
If you put
caffeine and sugar, yeah.
Yeah, if you put any other product and say this, okay, so I can't talk to people and I'm a really angry person until I have this in the morning. If you said, oh, I'm a really cunt in the morning and I want to yell at people, before I have my first beer, you'd be like, oh, mate, you have an issue. Or before I smoke my crack pipe, or whatever it is. But then you say, before I have my cup of joe, I want to rip your head off. It's pretty...
Yeah.
It's widespread,
It's fair enough.
I shouldn't talk against my own product, but I think it's just funny how sometimes, and I think Nick, Nick Reed pointed it out to me because he didn't use it in coffee. And he goes, you have a crazy addiction. I'm like, yeah, I do.
So, yeah, I mean...
So we're talking about the third waves.
So hang on, the waves. So there's 3 waves.
So I think the first wave was exporting into the world, and I think that the second wave I think is the coffee houses like Starbucks, all that existing, and then the third wave being specialty coffee, which is what we're in now.
So I mean, when we talk specialty coffee, are we talking about these are we talking about pour over drip things and kind of different ways to actually make the coffee? Or are we talking adding flavors and all kinds of shit to it?
No. So officially specialty coffee is really something that's graded. This the Specialty Coffee Association of America has a grade when something's if it's over over 80 it's a specialty coffee, and then goes up to 90 and over 90. Get coffee is 95. It's the most amazing coffee in the world. So it's a point system.
Ah, okay.
So it's just a high grade coffee.
Fuck, I was way off.
Yeah. But
is that when they add caramel to the coffee and put some whipped cream on top?
Yeah. When they put
that sounds special.
Yeah, so special. Pumpkin spice.
Ah, yes, pumpkin spice.
Yeah. Starbucks, go to hell with this pumpkin spice. Yeah. So it's really about good coffee. It's really nothing to do with obviously all the methods and stuff come in afterwards, but it's really about good coffee. So when we're talking about good coffee too, we're talking about tracing the coffee and knowing the process of the coffee, which is a big part. So to be that good of a coffee, you're explaining where it comes from, who made it, and how you processed it. So that's what specialty is. It's traceable.
And that's got to be a pretty important part of the process these days when it comes to, because I'm sure there's been hundreds of thousands of farmers over the years that have been probably taken advantage of when it comes to getting their coffee beans, right?
Yeah, and still happening all the time. I mean, I used to do a lot of coffee tastings, and obviously, when I moved here and opened the cafe here, a lot of coffee tastings was literally introducing what specialty coffee was, and then I was and in my tasting, I would buy Starbucks coffee, and I would serve 3 coffees, and then I would make a V60, a pour over method, and I'd talk to them at the same time. And then the last coffee, I would serve a Starbucks coffee and I'd make it in a V60. And then I would just say, this is a coffee that I don't know where it comes from. It doesn't say on the bag. It's just a product of Latin America, which is the most open fucking suggestion of an origin I've ever heard.
It's a big place, Latin America.
Big place. And then, I'd say, what does it taste like? And people were like, oh, it tastes burnt. And it tastes, like chocolate and leather. And I was like, coffee's a fruit. If it tastes like carbon or leather or shoe or whatever, like it's lost its flavor. So what happens then? Buy a bunch of bad coffee and I roasted all the same roast and you can't taste the difference.
So it's all in the roast. Well, not all, but...
Well, all bad coffee is dark roasted, but not all dark roasted coffee is bad.
Got it.
That makes sense?
That makes sense.
Oh, good.
That's good to know, actually.
Hey, look at that.
I might write that down. Or I can just listen to it. Listen back to it.
Yeah.
You're getting deep into coffee in Melbourne.
Yeah, I'm getting deep into coffee. And then I'm getting deep more into, I've worked in some restaurants. I started working at a bar. I started working everywhere. But I'd say, like, not just, apart from the work, like, just going out in Melbourne was crazy. Like, so much good restaurants. Best Italian food, best Turkish food, best Lebanese food. Like,
Spoiled for choice. It's crazy.
So I think, like, being exposed to so much different kinds of hospitality and restaurants and stuff made me being really interested in it.
Yeah.
And I was also really lucky. I had my ex-girlfriend actually worked in PR, and she worked PR for restaurants, a lot of restaurants, went to a lot of events.
Yeah.
And she also started working for Tequila Tromba.
Oh, okay.
Which is how I met Nick Reid.
Ah, and it all comes together.
That's how it comes together, yeah. I actually remember the day when I first heard about Nick Reid. My ex-girlfriend came home from work, and she was like, oh, I just had this client meeting, and I was like, I just want to sign these guys. And I was like, why? And she goes, this guy just came in flip-flops, like in thongs, and just like with a hoodie on, and he swore so much, and like he was so relaxed, and just like he was talking about tequila, and it has like this thing that it's made from agave that takes 8 years to grow, and blah blah. And I was like, sorry, what was that again? And then really her telling me about this meeting with Nick that she had once really made me interested. And I started working with Tequila Tromba, and I started meeting Nick more, and him talking a bit about tequila, whatever. I got curious. And so I started going Little Blood. I don't know if you've ever been there.
Yeah.
So
above Kodiak, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So I started going there a little bit because I wanted to, drink more tequila. And then my boss asked me at the cafe I was working. I was like, "Can you help organize where can we have the Christmas party?" And I was like, "Oh, not this great tequila bar." And he was so pissed off afterwards because I spent so much money in tequila. I was buying shots of Don Julio and which now doesn't sound that back then it sounded really cool.
Yeah.
But then just shots of Trombite and Reposados and stuff. It's just, it's Australia. It's fucking expensive.
It's an expensive place to drink. Yeah.
It's furious. And it's sort of. A year after that or something, I think I got really over hospitality. I had been fucked over opportunity to go into sales, for a coffee business, which would have been a terrible idea. But
right.
I sort of just wanted to move around in hospo and do different things, in all products relating to it, But yeah, I was over it, and I decided I was going to be an artist and do photographs.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I built a studio in my garage.
Yeah.
And started taking portraits. And I decided I'm going to work half time and I'm going to be an artist for a year.
Yeah.
Because
how'd that go?
I'd say about 3 months, 2 months into that, Nick sent an email to my ex-girlfriend saying he had moved back to Mexico.
Yeah.
And he's, we're doing this tour with Micro Sedano, which is the head distiller. Can you do the PR for it? And in the end, it said, P.S. Do you reckon Freddie wants to come to Mexico and open a cafe? In true Nick style too, a P.S.
Oh, by the way.
By the way, so I set up a call with Nick, and I said, yeah. Of course,
Didn't hesitate.
No. I was, the nature of who I am was just of course we need to do this.
Yeah.
So I talked to my girlfriend at the time, and said, let's do it. And then we had a trip booked to go to Sweden, and then I wanted to fly there in September to Mexico. And Nick was like, "Oh, I'm not ready. You have to wait 6 months." And I was like, "I can't. I'm coming now." And then, but me and my ex-girlfriend ended up breaking up during that time. So I was like, "I need to leave now." There was urgency of things need to change. So I pushed Nick to be I'm coming in 2 months, and came in 2 months, and we had no investment. There wasn't really a concept developed.
Yeah.
We literally had nothing, and me with a suitcase, and all right, let's go. And that's how I arrived 2 weeks ago. Yeah. So I arrived, I didn't speak Spanish. I only knew one person, which was Nick. Nick had 2 kids and a wife. So it's not like, hey mate, let's show me around town. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, it was very different. He was also working with Tromba, and I was just, not working, not doing anything. So I spend most of my days just walking around trying to find a place to put a cafe in, like finding a building.
How long did that process take?
About 8 months.
8 months?
I think
Was it that long?
Yeah. We opened the cafe after 8 months of me being here.
Holy shit.
Yeah. Or maybe 7 months, 7 or 8 months before we actually opened it. But I mean, I was early too. Like, he wasn't ready. He told me, he's like, I'm not ready. And I'm like...
I guess he said 6 months, right? So
yeah.
After you've arrived in Guadalajara and you're walking around the city, like, what was there a moment where you're like, I think this is a big mistake? Or was there like... Because, I've been to Guadalajara a handful of times, all mostly under the influence of alcohol.
Yeah.
But I just heard Nick talking about this today with someone, that it's not high on the list for tourists to visit. Yes, tourists come, but it's not like Mexico City is a world city. It's like a destination.
Yeah.
Guadalajara is further down the list.
Yeah, absolutely.
Still, what's the second biggest city in Mexico, right?
Yeah, second biggest city.
So still huge, plenty of history.
Yeah.
But was there a moment where you're like, oh, fuck,
Yeah, yes. I arrived, first of all, I was kind of distraught, heartbroken after being in a relationship for almost 7 years. Being really isolated, not speaking the language.
Yeah.
Not knowing anyone. That was, at that time, I remember the first, when I arrived, Nick picked me up and we went to his house, and I slept in one of his kids' bed. I slept in a child's bed, and I remember being I'm really tall, my feet were sticking out, and I remember mosquitoes biting me, and I just put the headphones, listening to Neil Young, trying to calm myself down, and be like, you've made the right choice. This is just your first night, And then about a week later, I got an Airbnb, and I remember the first night in the Airbnb, I drank a bottle of tequila.
Okay.
Because I was so sad. I just sat there and just drank the whole bottle. I was so lonely. I was like, I don't know what to do with myself. But the first kind of, this was again the way I saw moving from Sweden to Australia was kind of restarting. This was a rude awakening for me too. I was taken away from your friends and what you do for a living. Really, you lose track of who you are really, because you are a reflection of everyone around you really. What I mean? Well, that's how you perceive yourself at least. So, being really heartbroken, being really sad, I started drinking a lot, started going out as much as possible because the only way I could meet people. Yeah. And to a point, I think after about 2-3 months, I was so down and out. I got sick. I was really not taking, I wasn't eating well, drinking, drugs, and I think my lung, it's 20% of my lung had shut up, it was closed up. I had a sinus infection, a throat infection, and I had a stomach infection. And I didn't go to bed for a week, so Nick had to go pick me up and take me to the doctor. And while I was laying in bed there, I had this thought, this scary thought where I was like, I could die in this bed and no one would find me for a long time. And it just scared the shit out of me.
I'm sorry I'm laughing, but that's terrifying.
Yeah, no, absolutely terrifying. And then, but the realization, being that sick and not being able to stand up, realizing that you are responsible for your own actions. And if you don't pull yourself up now, no one, that was a crazy thing. That was a scary thought, that no one's going to be like, hey man, are you okay? Yeah. Because there was no one around. So I had to do it myself. So, I had 7 types of medicine to get myself better, and when I got better, I stopped drinking, I stopped smoking cigarettes, I started exercising, started meditating, I started doing yoga every morning. I was the rippest I've ever been. I've never been so healthy in my entire life. And in that moment, I decided I'm going to give 3 years to this business, no matter how, I'm not going to think about if I'm happy or whether how cool this is. I'm just because I went to university, so I thought, this is university. Yeah. So do this business for 3 years. And that was it, really. That made me push through for 3 years.
The cafe opened when? Sorry? What year are we?
It's 4 years.
4 years ago?
4 years ago.
What was it like? What was it like starting that business here in Guadalajara? Especially because we're talking the cafe. It's a Melbourne influenced cafe in Guadalajara, right?
Yeah.
That's the concept.
Yeah, I think from the beginning it was like bringing...
Fitzroy, I should say.
Fitzroy,
Cafe is called Fitzroy.
Yeah, it's called Fitzroy.
Suburb of Melbourne.
For me, it was always bringing the standard of coffee to the standard and this type of service, really. Like, it wasn't, I think from the beginning there was a thought that it'd be a bit more themed. And I was like, I wasn't really, I thought the type of service and the standard is enough. Like, I mean, just the fact that you get a bottle on the table is not very common here. Like, bottle of water.
Bottle of water, okay.
Yeah, so like, it was just little details like that, really. But yeah, I mean, usually when you open your first cafe or whatever, like in Melbourne, it's a common story, like you worked as a barista, saved up your money and your parents gave you some money, so you got through with some friends, and you opened a business in an industry where you knew people.
Yeah.
But we didn't know anyone. So it's just like this white dude opening a cafe in Guadalajara and no one knows who the fuck this guy is. So like I also, not only did we have to like build the reputation of the business, but also like had to build a friendship. Like friendships, I have to, make myself known in the industry, get to know people. So like, it was a constant work and a constant focus on like getting into the industry really and becoming someone within the industry.
Yeah.
But like the first 3 months we were fucking empty every day.
Wow, really?
Yeah. I didn't speak Spanish either. Like people walk in the door and I was the only barista in the start. I was like, people walk in the door and they're like, hola, and I'm like, hola. Like, terrible.
Cafe?
Yeah, like terrible idea having a tall Swedish dude who doesn't speak Spanish,
So, 3 months, not really kicking off very well. So, like, how did things turn around?
I think adapting the concept a little bit. Like we had thought that it was like, being used to Melbourne, pick up getting for coffee in the morning, then going to work and all that stuff. Like we were in a zone where that doesn't happen as much. It was more like people coming in and hanging out in the cafe. And then also like on the weekend we get really busy. So then when we did take off, like on the weekends, we would have like a line out the door waiting and have a full house, and we had one cook.
So there was a line for the cafe?
Yeah. It's like to get in to eat.
Yeah.
Because we realized, actually people go to cafes to eat. Like there's no money into selling coffee. So we're like, let's add food.
Yeah.
And so like I started designing a menu with a chef and blah, blah, but it was like, there was one cook. Like, can you imagine the pressure? It was like the room half the size of this and one frying board and like, there was like 4 things on the menu. So, we fucked a lot of things up at the start because we became really popular really quickly, but we weren't prepared for it. So service was fucked up, like, food taking an hour to get out because it was just like, there's one cook. But little by little we adapted, but yeah, we did take a lot of damage, like becoming really popular and not being ready for it, And I look at that, it was my first business I opened, with someone else and like, so it was a learning curve,
Yeah. And I guess simultaneously, and obviously the fact that you're in Guadalajara, in Jalisco, which is the tequila capital of Mexico.
Yeah.
Where did the interest and love for agave keep kind of, keep moving forward? And then obviously what led to one of the best bars in the world?
Yeah. It was really, like, to be completely honest too, by the time I got to had worked in coffee for a very long time, and also explaining my type of personality was like, learn something new, and again, and then again. So by the time I got here, I was interested because of what I've learned in Melbourne about agave.
Yeah.
And obviously through Nick, I was working for Tromba, bringing a film crew, like filming stuff for Tromba, going out in the fields or whatever, I would just come along. So I started helping out with some of that stuff, and that sort of brought me into it. And then we had this space above the cafe, and me and Nick were talking about it. It's like, we should open a tequila bar here. Because we had noticed too, with like going to drink tequila here was like, there was not that many options. Like, we were like, that's so weird.
Yeah.
Like, why are we in the heart of Jalisco and there's no like tequila bars? Like, first of all, there's no tequila bars. There's obviously bars with tequila, but it was no like bar dedicated just to tequila. There was definitely a lot of like mezcal around, like some really good place. Like Paris Safir was an amazing place that blew my fucking mind first time I went. Like drinking, a really traditional mezcal, listening to cumbia music, it like exploded my mind. Like, what is this, And there again, like getting into the whole idea of terroir, like why does it taste like this? Oh, it's because it comes from this agave. I was like, what agave? Oh, it grows up in the hill and it's called this. It takes 12 years and it's fermented in wood and then it's distilled in this clay pot. And I'm like, what? What do you mean? And I was like, I cannot explain it. Oh, it's a 350-year-old tradition. I'm like, what? It's just, the more I learned about it, it just blew my mind. So like knowing the processing behind coffee and the tradition in coffee, like this was just, for me, it was even crazier. Like, because when you look at agave spirit, like it's really just all the same thing. It's all mezcal. That's really what it is. It's all cooked agave that's been fermented and distilled, yeah? But if you look back and find like an traditional mezcal is really what tequila used to be. So, the way I see this is it's a timeline.
Okay.
So like, tequila tastes more like modern, you can go back in time and taste something the way they did it 350 years ago. For me, that blew my mind.
Yeah.
So starting to, having this idea of like, there should be a place for these smaller independent brands. Obviously Nick, like working in an independent tequila brand trying to break through the market was fairly like pissed off at big brands. And them just having monopoly. Me being just the just natural born rebel was like, yeah, fuck them. Let's start a business that's in spite of people, But really was just, to give these smaller brands a bit more of a voice and having a home for them and also, some traditional spirits from Jalisco. So we had this space upstairs and Nick was like, I know these two people, a couple called Adam and Amelia. We should invite them in to do this project. So they came along, they did the whole bark program and stuff. I did most of the design and stuff, the way the place would look and feel, all that stuff. So, and our idea was really just like, it should be like a quiet cocktail / agave bar.
Uh-huh.
And then within like 3 months, it was like packed to the brim, people dancing, we're just in laybacks, and I was like, oh, this is different. And it became really popular really quickly. And that really it caught my attention. So, and all of a sudden I had this really popular agave bar. So I was like, oh shit, just constantly learning about it all the time, started doing trips, going out in the mountains, meeting producers, just brought me deeper and deeper and deeper into it. So I didn't let it go for 3 years. I still haven't stopped. That's still my thing,
Well, I was just going to say, because, tequila is one thing. I mean, so we should clarify that when we're talking about tequila, it's only coming from Blue Weber agave.
Yeah.
But when we're talking about mezcal, it comes from what, over 30 different types of agave?
Yeah, it's 40 or 50.
It seems like it's, and tons of just really, like you said, really small producers. They could be just blokes in their backyard.
Yeah. I mean,
making it.
That's a lot of times that's exactly what it is, and it's the difference being having talking about a traditional product compared to an artisanal product and a what I call industrialized product is that an industrial product is obviously mass scale. A traditional or an artisanal product, talking about mezcal, it's still a product that's made with some traditional methods, but it's still made for the market. As a traditional mezcal, or sometimes they say ancestral, is like someone who makes it for them and their community, and then someone happens to buy it. So it's not made for mass market commercial reasons.
So do you find, are there areas where, are we talking about a small town, a small village, and then there's the one person in that area that's making mezcal and...
Well, usually how it works is when we go out, it's, the beginning it was we go with someone who knew someone, we went to, a town, and then he would introduce us to this producer, and, it really went from some artisanal producers, and then we'd go deeper and deeper into the subject you got. But then it'd be so there's a few brands out there. There's Mesont is a brand that, that's traditional. Love It in Orsa, most of their products are traditional too. But outside of those products is when you've gone there and you drank their spirit, you're like, oh, that's it. And then how do I find more of this traditional product? So the only way to do it is literally just you have to go there. So we started going out and you just go to a town, you know that someone makes mezcal in that town, and you just go, oh, I'm looking for mezcal. And they'll be like, oh yeah, that guy. And you go talk to him and he's like, oh yeah, I have some here. And, and it's, oh, then someone else makes it here. And it's oh yeah, the guy 2 roads down. And then just and it's just, the backyard has a wooden still. Which is, which we have one next to us, which is a few years old. But yeah, literally that, and that was such a big part of being open at a bar and it being this fun place, and which really had a good message behind it, was supporting small brands, which then also became supporting producers. So we kind of, the concept became deeper and we opened it up a little bit, and only having distillates from agave distillates from Jalisco. It all came from these travels, meeting these people and realizing, oh, these people don't have a voice. No one's, when people are releasing product, they're not talking about these producers. They're going to paint some romantic kind of image and, put together, a nice branding package with, some fields with some cactuses on it, whatever.
Yeah.
But really felt like these guys need to tell the story, need to tell the traditional story. But it's really like I felt like Indiana Jones. I've had these moments of being like back of a pickup truck, like drunk with my head hanging, like watching the moon hit, these mountains, coming back from some taberna up a mountain, like, and have, I thought it was the coolest thing in the world, and like my family, like my grandfather, my great-grandfather, and my father comes from a town of 50 people. It's my favorite place in the world. So like, there's something about that lifestyle too, and people who are doing things just because that's the way it is. Like, it's very uncomplicated.
Yeah.
So if you ask like a mezcalero, it's like, oh, why do you do it that way, or why do you ferment like that way? And it's like, oh, that's just the way I always did it. And that's the end of the question. Like, there's no geekery. There's no science. There's no
just trust. There's just a lot of trust in tradition.
It's just really that. Talking again about terroir, which I know I go on about a lot, but it's really, that's everything for me. It's like, and especially mezcal, I sit in wine, mezcal, and coffee more than anything. In a mezcal, you're talking about a certain agave that only grows in this region of Mexico, in that climate, on that height, on that hill, and really we're talking about the man, like the hand that makes that is the tradition. So it's mixing climate, earth with tradition.
Yeah.
And I think in a world which is monopolized, especially in the alcohol industry, like that needs to be preserved, So that became a big like calling in El Gallo to support these people and telling those stories,
Because it seems like, and I think I was talking to Nick about this when he was a guest, that premium tequila, it's only been a thing for 40 odd years. When it's kind of exploded on the world stage.
Yeah.
Do you think that, and mezcal has become much more popular, I think, in certain parts. Do you think that's the next thing that has to be, because like you said, there's hundreds of stories, hundreds of producers. So yes, some people are already doing it.
Yeah.
But is that the next kind of, big agave wave to come? Or it's already here.
It's here, but it can't grow. Like, for example, like just
it's not sustainable.
Not sustainable. So like, there's not enough agave to do it.
Yeah.
You can't supply. Like, Americans are really hungry. They like to drink a lot. There's a lot of them. There's 350 million people. They're just consumers. And you hear the bar going, yeah.
Yeah, the bar's open.
The bar's open. So, looking at how much tequila they're consuming. So we're talking about, it's like people like purists, they'll be like, oh, I don't like tequila, I prefer agave. Like, I prefer mezcal. And you go, that's cool, but stop saying that so much, because if people just start drinking mezcal, then you're fucking over the whole industry. Like, tequila is really made for, like, it's a commercial product. Mezcal is not necessarily a commercial product. It's a traditional product. But tequila is the commercial version of mezcal.
Yeah.
Which is, and people make really fucking good tequila, and you can make good tequila, and there's stores in it, and people have 100 years of making it, and 200 years of making it. But it was always a commercial product, But like, a producer that comes from a little town that produces like fucking 300 litres a year, like, how are you going to scale that? So like, and then what are you going to do? What are you going to do when it runs out? And also, like, mezcal has to be cooked underground with wood, okay? Mm-hmm. So can you imagine how much wood you must burn if someone's just like, oh, some big brand of mezcal, so we produce 20 litres a month, and you go, yeah, where's your wood coming from, you cunt? You know what I mean? Like, what wood are you cutting? Like, what forest are you cutting down to do this? And obviously it's something that's happening here while it's being enjoyed outside of the country, and this place is getting fucked for it. So it's like feeding a consumer market outside, and Mexico paying the price for it.
Yeah.
That's why I think it's important to be a little bit militant about it.
Yeah.
But educate about it, and make it really expensive. Like, mezcal should be really expensive. Like, it should be minimum $100 a bottle.
It's actually what Nick said something similar when he was talking about tequila. That the effort that goes into making the spirit itself, it's like it shouldn't be cheap.
No, never.
And if it's cheap, someone's getting fucked over.
Yeah. Or someone's always getting fucked over. That's the gist of the industry, Also, I think it's a big relationship. It's like the relationship that America has to Mexico. Like, it's a very long relationship of, like, enjoy the spoils of that country and, going somewhere else, which is a lot of countries that have been colonized have, happened the same thing, But yeah, I think, also right now, especially in the bartending world, and I think, mezcal's become a super trend, and I think they're looking at it, probably a lot of bartenders look at it and go like, what is this overpriced, wanky trend about mezcal? And, related same to natural wine, we were talking about yesterday.
Yeah.
So natural wine is the same thing. People are like, oh, what is this fucking hipster thing? Like, the bottle's like $25 and it's all weird. And, and you're going, because when big brands take control of it and don't communicate it right, that's what happens. So, for example, in natural wine, it's the same thing. It's a traditional method. And same as mezcal, it's a traditional method. So what we're talking about is culture and tradition, instead of just like, oh, this one's really funky and this one smells like cheese and this one, yeah, that's fine and all, but like, the whole gist of this is the history and the tradition behind it, not necessarily like, give me the funky one,
Yeah. And what you've poured some for us. Well, actually, you've already drunk yours. I've still got a bit.
Yeah, we should drink some mezcal.
What have you poured? Well, what was this first one? I'll finish this first one.
That's Cascawin Plata, which is their high proof that they've had for a few years now. But I have a collection here in my basement of 4 different platas, which they don't make it like they used to make it anymore. So I just keep them because I'm a little bit nerdy about this stuff.
Yeah,
I like to have little treasures.
Oh well, what should be the second one we're going to try?
You want something funky?
Yeah, give me the funky one.
Yeah, okay, I'll give you a funky one.
And talk me through the shape of these 5-litre bottles, because is this traditional to mezcal?
Yeah, I mean the traditional one they keep in mezcal, like they're called damajuanas or garrafones. Garrafones is the old. They are what they used to keep water in. So obviously you don't drink the tap water, and the water you get delivered in these big ones. There was one left to you there. It's like a big glass one, and damajuanas is like usually the 4-litre ones.
Oh, okay.
So this is a bit smaller. It's like 3.7 litres, I think. But yeah, they're all hand blown by this local guy. He's pretty famous actually. It's like he has this world record for the biggest blown bottle ever.
Really?
Yeah. And he makes a lot of bottles for tequila brands too. He makes Fortaleza bottles, for example.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is a raicilla from the coast of Jalisco. It's fermented in a big plastic tub. It's with a closed lid for about 25 days, so it naturally becomes a bit cheesy. It's made from an agave called Amarillo, which is very common to that area. I think it's an exterior Amarillo, which is from a type of agave called Rodacanta.
Ooh, that's good.
Yeah, but it's, fermented for a really long time, but that's why it gets these flavors. But yeah, and also distilled in that wooden still that's next to you. So
that smoke lingers.
Yeah, it's also because they a lot of times they cook it underground, and then whilst they're working, they might be busy fermenting, so they just keep that batch underground until the other one's ready to distill. So that means that sometimes they keep it an extra week underground. Ooh. Yeah. So when we went to pick this up. We've heard in this town that there was a few people who make raicilla, so we just stopped the car and asked the first guy, and he said, oh yeah, this guy down here, and we bought some there. I bought 10 litres or something, and the guy next door is my nephew. He also makes it. This guy in a hammock, sitting there and going. And it's just funny, they always do the same thing too, and I was like, oh, hey mate, how you doing? They told me you have raicilla, and he goes, yeah, and he just goes in the back, just brings it out and just serves you like a 3-ounce pour. And he goes, try it. So it's funny because everyone does the same thing. It's like the spirit speaks for itself. I don't have to prove anything. It's like you try it. If you like it, we talk. Yeah. So I like that. It's a very kind of ritualistic thing, And also, I think also because I'm a foreigner, they're always like, hey, yeah, take the 4 ounces, you dick, And then also just leaving it would be a bit rude. So with this specific trip, we did 4 stops. So I drank, what's that, 12 ounces of 50% alcohol mezcal, and at the end of it, you're pissed, mate.
But there must be something him just going out the back and picking up a bottle, coming in, pouring it out. There's definitely a sense of pride in that, where it's and I love the fact that, you're not going to a tasting room where you're being sold and they're already talking about the spirit or the wine before you've even had a taste of it.
Yeah.
It's just like, look, here it is.
Yeah.
Taste it. Tell me what you think. Then let's talk.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, and also like it's very. Every time I've done these trips, I feel honoured. Like I feel very privileged to be able to be there. And for me, it's also like part of the reason I'm going is not just because it's fun. It's also because I will, document. I will, talk about the process and how long you've been making it and who taught you to make it and did your father make it, your grandfather make it, and blah blah. And all around the place too, this foods you eat there that you've never seen before, and everyone's role in that production. Like the wife might have a job in making that, and the kids are the ones who usually gets the bottles, and like there's a lot of culture around it as well, and
Yeah.
when I do trips, I come back to the crew in El Gallo, and the first thing I do is like bring a big bottle up, and we serve it and drink it, and I tell stories and show photos. And usually that night, when we open for service, they'll have a bottle, and they'll tell those stories to the clients.
Pass it on.
You pass it on. So it's like, it's really just kind of again like that's what Gallo really is about, is retelling these stories and sharing this culture. In a climate like we talked about, which is probably monopolized.
Yeah. And I guess, being the owner of, the bar was listed as being in the top 50, right? Of some, what was that last month?
No, that was, so when we opened, we got a nomination in Tales of the Cocktail for Best New Cocktail Bar in Americas, which was like, what? Like, we were open for 7 months, we were such a mess. Like we had a handwritten menu that we'd make every week. And it was like really loose, but it had a lot of heart. I'd imagine that someone would have walked in there on a perfect night on a Sunday and a DJ playing, people sweaty dancing, and this was being the greatest vibe and being like, oh my God, this place is great, But yeah, after 7 months being nominated for Best New Cocktail Bar. But I think we, obviously doing what we do, prizes and awards was never really a thing for us. We just wanted to be we just want to do it our way and tell these stories. But I remember that nomination coming in, and I was like, oh fuck, if we got nominated this quickly, and that must mean we're doing something good. So I have to be honest, it did motivate me to be like, oh cool, what else can we do? How can we make this better? And then the 50 Best one was just 50 Best 2 years ago started this thing called 50 Best Discovery, which is really a guide to different cities in the world. So you go to a website, you pick Guadalajara, and a few places come up. And we got a nomination we were on that list 2 years ago, but because me not caring so much, I never posted it. I was just like, whatever. and then this year again, I was seeing all that. I was like, oh, actually, I should probably put it up there.
Yeah. Maybe a little bit of marketing,
Yeah, I think that was I think that's part of a Gallo is too. It was it's a little bit of a rebel. We don't have any big brands. We're just you do events with these bars from the 50 Best or whatever. Usually those events are paid for by Jose Cuervo or whatever it is. We're so I would get to know, for example, we had a last Sunday we had a takeover with Haley from Attaboy, which was an amazing night and amazing bartender. I've come from
Attaboy out of New York, right?
Yeah. So school of milk and honey to Attaboy, that's a holy school of bartending kind of thing.
Yeah.
I got to know her in Mexico City a few months ago. I was like, oh, you should come and do a guest shift sometime, And then you just afternoon you go, oh fuck, who's gonna pay for this? Because we operate independently, so we're just, at this time, obviously, we talked to Trombo and we're hey, man, this girl's really good. You want to bring her over? And that's really what it is. And I was just doing favors. We refuse to be bought. We don't do cocktail listings for money.
Well, that's the thing. So big brands can come in and just pay venues cash just to kind of list their stuff, right?
So much money.
Is that more common? I mean, it's common here.
Yeah.
Are people still doing it? I mean, because
yeah, mate. Yeah, absolutely. It's it's illegal. It still happens.
That's what that was my hesitation. I'm like, well, it's kind of illegal, right?
Yeah, but it's you don't. The way it works is so you can pay for a cocktail listing, but if someone for example, if we pay for a bartender to fly down, and then you have a tequila company can obviously take them out. You know what I mean? You can't fly, you can't pay for someone to come, but you can take care of them while they're here.
Oh, but I'm talking more like listing the product.
Oh yeah, that's paid for as well. But also it can be a deal. I mean, obviously the cash thing's obviously legal.
Right.
But you saying, for example, I'll put you on this cocktail list for this cocktail, I'll put you in there for 6 months or whatever, it would obviously be like, we'll give you a deal on like, we'll give it for cheaper. Like, we'll give you X amount for free cases for, blah, blah, blah. So they make a deal, and you make a deal for 200 cases.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's obviously cash, like, of course, like this, of course, just envelopes of cash being handed over, And I was like, we were like into COVID. I was just like, oh fuck, why did I, open this bar that's independent? Like, I want money, like I don't have any money left. But we stuck to our guns and we will always do it. I mean, like that's the reason why we exist. Like, if I one day would just be like, oh, I'll just put a big brand on the menu, like my whole. Gallo's reason for existing would cease to exist.
Yeah.
Which may make the bar fucking useless. So we're still like in our own way, like we've done a few events or whatever, but we always go like, it's funny to explain when inviting a bartender and being like, so what do you need? Like, are you okay with sleeping on a couch? Are you okay with sleeping in my house? Do you like cheap breakfast? But yeah, so yeah, obviously going back to obviously having this like being nominated and then going forward there, we always had like people coming through town to go to tequila. So we're lucky.
Of course, it's a bit of a hub where people are going to be always coming through.
Yeah, like bartenders or friends, whatever. Like Don Julio would fly a bartender down. The bartender would go like, "Oh, can I do a shift at your bar?"
Yeah.
So like, thanks Don Julio for paying for that bartender to come. So it happened all the time because like obviously having a lot of bartenders coming through, like the word kind of spread amongst bartenders, I think. So every time they come to Guadalajara, they would ask like, "Oh, I want to go to Gallo." They wouldn't be part of the tour because we don't carry big brands, but they would all come. So we would love that stuff. Like,
yeah.
I know we've had a few big brands to come in and actually spend money, and that makes us very happy. Like, and we're not dicks about it. Like, I've met a lot of, people that were executives of big brands and still here drinking, and you just explain the concept, and and they're like, oh, okay, cool. Like, it's not a fuck you. It's just, like, most back bars are owned by 3 different alcohol companies. So we're like, you need a bit of, bit of counteraction,
Diversity.
Diversity is important. Yeah, this is 2021. Get with it, guys. Diversity.
Well, I mean, there's got to be a few. Are there any crazy stories that come to mind over the current life of Gallo? Which means what again?
El Gallo Altanero means the cocky cock.
The cocky cock. I was going to say rooster.
It really sounds bad in English. But Altanero
like
is
the confident rooster.
Yeah, confident, cocky, proud kind of thing. That's representative of what we do. Crazy stories. I mean, ones. I mean, I'm sure there's probably a few that probably can't be repeated. And shouldn't be repeated. Yeah.
But if there's anything that's relatively. I was going to say kid friendly, but
no. I mean, I'll give you like just a nice story. There's the guy that came in with a common friend, and he came in. It's a guy from the US, and he hung out for like 2 hours, had like 2 cocktails and a drink, and had a wonderful chat with the guy. And he's like, "Thank you so much, like, Crusoe, I lovely, blah blah blah." And he's like, "Oh, let me just get my bill." And I was like, "Oh," he's like, "No, I don't want to pay the bill." And I was like, oh, "Okay, cool." And then he left, and I said, "Thank you." And I said, "We'll keep in contact," and blah blah. And then the manager came up and he's like, "Who is that guy?" And I was like, I don't know, I just met him. And he goes, I guess he left a 7,000 peso tip.
Wow.
And I'm like, Jesus fucking, And then, so I texted the guy the day after, and I was like, were you drunk? Like, did you push the wrong thing? Are you sure?
Was it meant to be 700?
Yeah, and he's like, no, you guys deserve it. So that's
sensational.
Yeah, I went to the contrary, I went to the nice story, but yeah, he's now known as the Saint of September.
Okay.
In the bar. No, I've been crazy stories. I mean, like, I don't know, in the beginning, like, just looking at how we opened and having, like, two bartenders and having one person working on the floor with 50 people in the bar.
That's a lot.
Yeah, and packed to the brim. We've had full-on mariachi bands playing the bar. We've had laybacks from 3-minute balconies. Nick have climbed up the balcony and surprised the girl with a layback. It's not laybacks. I've lit... the altar that we have upstairs?
Yeah.
I once poured like we usually there's a tradition in the start of the shift we pour some tequila on the Virgin Mary.
Yeah.
And in the middle of the shift, I was very happy and very content with the night. So I thought I'll give her some thanks. But I grabbed the closest bottle, which happened to be high proof. So I lit the Virgin Mary on fire and had to kind of quickly put it out.
I'm going to have to take some photos of the altar. I think you put on Instagram. It's quite a special special thing.
I think the special we get with Gaia too, which is like the thing of like being located where we are, really far away from everything else, being close to tequila, like literally the town of tequila and Los Altos and all kinds of agave spirits here. But is that I've had moments where I looked around at the bar and I've had like Guillermo Sousa that owns Fortaleza, like Cacha that owns Don Fulano, and then have Chava owns Cascawin, like all drinking together around the bar, and I was like, that fucking doesn't happen anywhere, like But having those like moments and being like, oh wow, and I think that's really, and that's what that always is my home for those brands,
And what does the future hold?
What does the future hold?
Not in general, like
for me,
specifically for you, specifically for Fitzroy, specifically for El Gallo.
Well, the basement that we're in is something I've been working on for a long time, and it's collecting all these agave spirits to keep in here and do tastings, which is kind of it's part of Gallo, but it's a serious space where I can talk more about history and tradition and, just taste and, for it to be a serious side of things, That's getting this ready is one thing that will happen in the future. And I don't know, we have a few plans. So like we have a new rented a house that we want to open a place in too. So there's a new concept in the making.
Yep.
But really, besides that, it's just focusing on Gallo and obviously being closed in for 2 years and not being able to travel. Is that we want to bring Gallo to the States, like, I want to do a full-on tour, just, spread the word, just, break some hearts and and piss some people off. That's really what I'm all about. I just want to piss some people off.
Well, I reckon that is a lovely way to wrap things up by the motto of Freddy to say, I just want to piss a lot of people off. But thanks for having me down here in the basement.
Thanks for coming.
It's been educational. And this is what it's all about. The old dish pig.
Yeah.
And thanks for the mezcal. Cheers.
Cheers.
And if you have any ideas of what we're going to get up to tonight, just let me know.
Oh, it's going to be raw.
Thanks, mate.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to The Dish Pig. Remember to follow us at _dish_pig on Instagram. You can also send us an email at ask@dishpigpodcast.com. So reach out to us if you have any suggestions, any culinary tales, any topics that you'd like covered on the podcast. We'd love to hear from you. See you next time.